This is John McMichael. I'm your host for Aiken Business Matters, and we are delighted today to have with us a very special guest, Mr. Tom Foster. Tom is the President and Project Manager for Savannah River Remediation. And he's also a Group Vice President for AECOM, and that's quite a big job, and I hope that you'll enjoy hearing Tom tell us a little bit about himself and about the operations that he's responsible for at the Savannah River Site. Tom, thank you so much for being with us today.
You're welcome. Pleased to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, you are an old and a new resident of Aiken.
Yes, I am.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about your history in the nuclear industry.
All right. Well, I did much of my growing up in Florida, and I came up to Savannah River Site in the early 1980s, 1981 actually, and I worked here for 26, 27 years, something like that, and did a number of different assignments out at the site, and I had 5 children, raised my children here.
Wow.
And so it was a great experience. And then about 10 years ago, my wife and I decided that we would go on a road trip. So we went out to Eastern Washington, and I worked at Hanford there for a number of years, a similar type work in the nuclear business. And then we got the opportunity to go overseas, and so we went to the United Kingdom, and I worked at a place called Sellafield for about 5 years. And then just last May we came back, so we've been back almost a year now. And so
welcome back.
It's been great to be back. I tell you, there's no place like home, and it's great to be back here.
Well, we're glad you're back here, and you certainly bring a wealth of knowledge and experiences that you've continued to, because I guess no place is exactly like the other place.
That's right.
Every place has its own identity, just its own set of DNA, and you gain a great deal of respect for all the things that are going on. But your real focus here is cleanup.
That's right.
And so tell us a little bit about what the mission for the remediation is at the site.
All right. Well, I think most people are aware that the purpose of the Savannah River Site was to provide defense materials for the nation, so primarily plutonium, uranium, tritium. And as a byproduct of all of that work, it created large amounts of what we call high-level waste. And it was stored in underground tanks that are about 1 million gallons. There was actually 51 of those tanks that were built at Savannah River Site. And so there's a tremendous amount of that waste that's still there. There's about 35 million gallons of waste still there. And it's partly liquid and partly in a solid form. And what we do is we take and have pumps in those tanks, and we mix it up and make kind of a slurry, almost like a smoothie. And we take that then and we pump it over to the defense waste processing facility. And we mix that with some sand-like material, heat it up to very high temperatures, and make a glass out of it. And then we take that glass and pour it into a stainless steel container. It's about 10 feet tall, a couple feet around. And once that material is put in that container and welded up, it's at a very safe and stable form. It's impervious to weather and tornadoes and earthquakes and that sort of thing. So it's a great place. In fact, if you get a chance, there's a replica of one of those containers outside the AECOM office on Newberry Street, in the middle of the road there, in the median. So if you want to see what one looks like, you can come by and see. It's a very, very exact replica of what we're producing out at the site. But there's no radioactive material in it.
Well, so we can't do anything for the power grid in Aiken from
no, unfortunately not.
No.
No.
It almost looks like a torpedo. In some respects.
Yeah,
so,
it does.
But it's certainly a very ingenious way. It took somebody with a lot of imagination, a lot of thought to come up with that process to do that. How many years have the defense waste been going into that type of process?
Yeah, the process of making glass is called vitrification, and it's been studied really across the world since the 1960s. We started the defense waste processing facility at Savannah River Site in the early 1980s, or the late 1980s actually. So we actually just celebrated our 20th anniversary last year, and we had a celebration at the site to commemorate the 4,000th container that we had made, and we also had closed 8 waste tanks during that time. So it was a great event to kind of commemorate the accomplishments.
Right. I know recently at one of the CAB meetings that some of your employees were honored for a very unique project that they completed out there. Would you like to tell us about that?
Oh, this is the double stack you're referring to?
Yes.
Yeah, this was a real innovative idea. When we formed those containers, like I said, we have 4,000 of them, And we have a building that we put them in, actually two of them. We call it a glass waste storage building. And the way that building is built, it's like a concrete monolith that has cylindrical holes in it, and we put a container in each one of those holes. Again, it's a very safe, stable way to store them. And when the buildings were designed, the idea was to put one container in each hole. And the buildings are expensive. They cost like $140 million each for the buildings. And the guys started thinking about, could there be a way we could get two containers in each hole? Now, it's a simple idea, but I'll tell you, it's sort of out of the box thinking, because it wasn't designed that way. And there are quite a bit of calculations that had to be done to say, well, do we get too much heat loading? Can the concrete withstand that? How can we fit them in there? We'll have to modify the enclosures. And they worked through all that. And now we're on to actually doing what we call double stack. So we put two containers in each hole. It sounds simple, but there was quite a bit of work to get there. And in the end, it saves us from having to build an entire another building at a cost of over $100 million. So.
That was tremendous. And I know that when I first heard the presentation of the idea, that there quite a bit of computer modeling and things like that went into it. So it wasn't something that, oh, that sounds like a great idea, let's go do it. There was an awful lot of research and behind the scenes thing that went into it that made this whole process take place. And as a result, taxpayers were able to save an awful lot of money from doing this. And it's effective, and it is in place, and it's going forward now.
We're doing it now, absolutely.
Tell us a little bit about tank closures out there.
Well, it's interesting. I mentioned some of those places that I've been. We have high-level waste out at Hanford. I was managing the high-level waste program in the UK when I went over there. I had an opportunity to visit the similar facilities in France and in Japan when I was doing the overseas work. And I'll tell you that none of those places have closed a tank other than Savannah River. So we are in the leading edge of actually getting this work done. But there were 51 tanks. At this point, we've closed 8 of them. When we say close, what we do is we get all of the waste that we possibly can get out of the tank, and we work with South Carolina DHEC to establish and say, yes, it's empty.
Right. And
when it's empty, then we can come back and fill it with grout, which is kind of like a concrete type mixture. And then it's stable, it's empty, it's stable, and it's left there in that configuration.
How do you know that you've got the tank empty? Do you use robots?
We do.
And video?
Yeah. So we have a number of methods of, first thing we do is I mentioned the pumps that we slurry up the material and pump it all out. And then you can find some residual material still left. So we have robots and crawlers that go around and help us do some of the final cleaning. And then we have video that we look in there and take measurements and make sure that we get all the waste that can possibly be removed out.
We talk about the process, but I know that one thing that is very much on your mind and all your staff's mind is the safety of the people that work out there. So I imagine that's as much a part of it as the process itself.
Oh, it absolutely is. Safety is our number one value, and we refer to safety as a value, not as a priority, because it's not like safety or something else. It's the way that we do work. We know we have work to do, but we're all about doing it in a safe manner. So that's the first priority. And it is hazardous. I mentioned this celebration that we had last year, and Governor Nikki Haley sent us a letter congratulating the team and the workforce on what they'd done. And in that letter, she referred to the high-level waste in those tanks as the single greatest environmental hazard in the state of South Carolina. So we know that's our obligation to go clean that up, and we work on it in a very safe manner. Right now, one of the things we do is track how long we work without having an injury that might be significant enough that someone would have to stay home, couldn't come to work. And right now, just this week, as a matter of fact, we reached 3 million hours since the last time we had an injury. So
I got to congratulate you on that. That's quite an accomplishment.
Well, it is, and the workforce is to be commended, and they have a real focus on that.
Well, safety first is really your motto. I know that. That is integrated so closely with the mission that you have, because you can't do it without the people, and you want the results to be great. And one thing that I see that permeates an awful lot, and I do know a number of folks that work with your organization, with SRR and also AECOM, and I noticed one thing that kind of really stands out to me is the fact that there's an awful lot of teamwork. I don't see people wanting to take credit. I see that people always say, "Hey, it's a team thing." It's they'll look around to their mentors and also their co-workers to talk about. So I think that's something that is really driven from the top, and I appreciate your leadership in doing that.
Well, that's I mentioned to you we have values, core values that we use to kind of explain who we are as a company, who we want to be as people, and safety is the first one, and another one is teamwork. Because you're right, there's none of us is as smart as all of us, and the only way we get work done in a complex environment like Savannah River is to work together. So there's a tremendous amount of that, and there's collaboration across the site as well. I mean, SRR, we work closely with the Department of Energy, and we work with SRNS, the Centera, the guys who do the protective force. So it's an entire team that makes the site operate.
Well, it really has to be, because it's such a complex and a very technologically challenging environment to work in on a day-to-day basis. And I know that you have so many redundancies built in for safety and for things like that. One thing that really kind of was pointed out by the double stacking is that the impression that I get is that you're always looking to improve the process. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, that's a fair statement. Innovation is the key to making things work. I'll give you another example. We're actually changing out one of our melters now in the Defense Waste Processing Facility. Right. So the melter is where I mentioned we pour the waste and the sand-like material and heat it up, and that's heated up in a big pot that we call a melter. And you can imagine, highly radioactive waste in there, heated up to hundreds and hundreds of degrees. So it's a harsh environment. The melter was designed back in the early days to last about 2 years, and they figured we'd have to change it out every 2 years or so. And we're actually just now changing out the second melter after 20 years of operation.
Wow.
And the last one lasted for 14 years. And that was through innovation that you just talked about. It was a number of things that the guys did, working with the Savannah River Lab, working with our own engineering team, the operations guys, and came up with ideas on how they could improve the melter operation and extend the life. And it's another big cost saving, because the melter, probably something in the $40 to $50 million range to do this whole change out. So you can see the cost savings associated with extending it to 14 years versus the original design of 2 years. Right?
Even somebody as challenged as I am with math can figure out that that's a huge savings.
Huge savings, yeah.
And the amount of money today, as opposed to what you put into it initially, that was certainly a great economic boon to you and your operations. So you've had a number of things on your side with SRR that has really benefited the taxpayers, the mission at the site, and that we talk about the cost savings and money for equipment, but it's more than that. It's cost savings of man hours down that you didn't have to stop to change it out,
right.
And the ability to be able to continue to process the
Well, it
equipment.
lets us take the money that the department provides to us, and we can fold that back into cleaning up more waste, as opposed to having to, say, build another building or buy another melter. So it really advances the whole program. The intent here is just to get it done as soon as possible. That's the idea. The waste is in tanks that are decades old. Time is our enemy here, right? So like any man-made object, the tanks will degrade over time. Now they're safe now, and we do a lot of monitoring, and we're very careful to manage them. But they won't last forever. It's just a fact. So the sooner we can get the waste out, and the waste is in not the most stable form when it's in this liquid form of the tank. Right. So again, we want to get it out safely, and make glass out of it as quickly as possible. So having an efficient operation really helps move that along.
These tanks that you're clearing out, you've had some within the last year that you've closed.
Yes. Yeah, we closed one again last April. April of 2016 was the last one that we closed. Right. So, we're excited about that, and we'll continue working on it.
And you've got others coming down the right.
Yes, we do.
How many tanks do you work on at one time?
Well, it's a jigsaw puzzle. It's like three-dimensional chess. Yeah. It's hard. I can't even explain it to you. What has to happen is there's a little complexity here. Is that we have to we have to mix the waste into what we call a batch.
Right.
And that batch then has certain chemical characteristics that we then work with the Savannah River lab to be able to make glass out of it. So it's not just as simple as mixing the two together and heating up. There's a lot of high-level chemistry involved. So we have to move the waste around in various tanks to be able to separate the solids, the sludge part, from what we call the salt part. And then some tanks we use to feed DWPF, other tanks we use to receive from DWPF. There's other tanks that we use to process the salt waste. There's other tanks we use to support the evaporators, which get rid of some of the liquid. So there's probably several dozen that are actively engaged in managing the waste at any given time.
Well, that was a great explanation, and I wanted you to give it because I didn't want people to leave with the idea that here we have all these tanks, they're full of material, and it's just a matter of us pumping it out, mixing it, and it's a lot more complex.
It's more complicated
yes.
than that. Yeah.
Thank you. That was a very good explanation. Do people come from other parts of the globe to see what you're doing out there?
Absolutely. We have visitors from Sellafield, from the UK, have been over. We have people from a place in France called La Hague, which is a similar kind of operation there. We certainly collaborate a great deal with other people across the world because this problem isn't unique to Savannah River.
Right.
I would suggest that we're making the most active progress, but other people have high-level waste as well that they work on. So,
just as a point, the national lab is one of the national labs is located at the Savannah River Site. Do you work in conjunction with the national lab in your projects?
Yes, they've been a partner from the very beginning. A lot of the technical expertise on forming the glass form itself, and I left out, as you said, it's a little more complicated. I've simplified some of it, but we put the highly radioactive sludge material into glass. Another product is after we take out some of the radioactive cesium and other components, we make a product called saltstone.
Right.
So it has it's like a grout cement material, but it has this radioactive salt, has very residual amount of it. It's basically decontaminated. But they help us, back to the lab, so they help us with the formulations for the saltstone, they help us with the formulations for the glass, and they help with the formulations for the sludge batches that we have to mix up and the salt batches that we have to mix up. So yeah, there's a lot of collaboration and teamwork that goes on with the national lab there.
Other than the smelter that you're putting in, have you had any new projects that are going on out there right now?
Well, we've got one that we're working on right now that we call tank closure cesium removal.
Okay.
That's TCCR, and we call it TICR. And what that is an alternate way to maybe clean up some of the what I refer to as the salt waste.
Right.
So this is material that has largely cesium and some strontium in there, and those are radioactive materials that need to be removed from the tank. And it's actually, at this point, the largest component of what remains to be cleaned up is this so-called salt waste. And the idea behind this TICR project is to install some resin columns, ion exchange columns, think of it like as a big filter. And we're going to install those right next to one of the tanks and pump the waste through the column and essentially filter out some of the radioactive material. And that'd be an alternate way to help us clean up some waste. So it's a bit of a pilot project. We just started it last year. It's supposed to be finished next year, and we'll start the operation about summer of 2018.
And I imagine it's a pretty monstrous piece of equipment.
Well, it's really not as big as you might think. This is a it might be like a size of a small building, but it's
Okay.
not. It's not. This is the idea is to be modular and to be something you could deploy at the tank.
Move from tank to tank.
Yes,
then.
yeah. You probably would have to build another one, but you could put them at various locations around the site. So we're looking at this as a pilot technology. The state of South Carolina is very interested in this, and because it provides an opportunity to get work done quickly.
Right.
And so if it turns out to be successful, we might do some more of them. And it potentially has application out at Hanford in Eastern Washington with their tanks as well. So back to the innovation, this is part of a newer technology that we're developing.
So these are things that are not just going to be a sole proprietor thing where you keep them here,
Right.
that you can share them and they're used in other DOE sites around
Absolutely.
the country. And that's tremendous. I think that one of the things that people will appreciate is, and I've always appreciated the relationship between the site and the community. And I think, you know, we think of the site, but I think sometimes it's we lose sight of the fact that there's a huge economic engine that is driven out there that supports our community and the things about it. How many people are actually employed at the site?
There's probably a little more than 10,000, you know, across the site with all the different contractors and the Department of Energy. We've got about 2,200 that work at Savannah River Remediation, and to your point about the economic impact, that, you know, our payroll alone is over $150 million, wow. And pretty much almost 2/3 of those people live in Aiken County, so that's a real economic, you know, driver for Aiken. We also spend a lot of money just, you know, getting our work done, so we have to buy materials and equipment and buy services. And we spend more than $40 million a year just here in the CSRA helping, you know, bring materials out to get work done out at the site. So
that's one thing that just always amazes me. We don't think about all the ancillary things that happen as a result of having you as a neighbor. One thing that it's real key. I know that there's a challenge for employees too, getting good people to come to work at the site for you and all the other contractors too. How important is the new program that the University of South Carolina here in Aiken has with the new engineering program that they've initiated last year?
Well, you know, we're proud to have been working with USC Aiken on that. You know, Sandra Jordan does a great job of running the university, and we work with her and her team very closely. In fact, AECOM provided the initial funding to get that engineering program started there. And so they've designed it so that it would be an engineering program that would ready students to come work at a plant right away.
Right.
Now there's all kinds of engineers, you know, there's chemical engineers and electrical, et cetera. And they've designed their program to provide almost like a plant engineer that would be, you know, be ready to hit the ground running when they get out there. And so we think that's going to be a very exciting opportunity for the young people in this area.
And then we look at other educational institutions around here. The Aiken Technical College have a number of programs in there to ready people for the workforce out there.
Yeah, Forrest Mahan works with us very closely, the president there at Aiken Tech, and they have programs to help ready people for things like radiological control technicians. They have maintenance type degrees, welding. Yeah, all those
welding
sort of things.
they've got a tremendously complex welding program out there. You can get all kinds of certifications through their welding program that would lend itself to work at the site.
Yeah, well, we do a lot of welding, do a lot of construction work, and it's very, you know, highly technical. There's a nuclear quality assurance that goes along with the welding that we do. So you have to be very skilled at it, and you have to understand, you know, the ways that the welds have to be made to pass all the strict requirements of the nuclear industry, man.
Well, Tom, I can tell from just our conversation how proud you are of your organization and the people that work in it, and the job that you do to support the site and DOE. What is, if you wanted to leave our viewers with one final thought, what really makes it worthwhile for you to go to work every day? What is the real thing that energizes you to go do this complex job that your organization is responsible for?
Well, you know, I'll be honest with you. The general manager of AECOM here in Aiken is an individual named Dr. Todd Wright, and I've worked with him for several years, decades. And he often refers to the work we do as a noble mission. And what it gets back to is you know, we're here as part of the Cold War. The Cold War is over, and we've got this legacy that's left, you know, across the country actually. And those of us involved in this are doing it because it's hard work, it's technical work, it requires perseverance and patience and dedication and all those things. But it's important work that needs to be done. So I think really to me, the reason I continue to stay energized and continue to work on it is understanding that it's a difficult task that someone needs to do. And we at Savannah River Remediation, we've got the right people with the skills and the energy and the commitment to do it, and that's what makes it exciting.
Well, I know that our viewers, from just hearing you talk about it, that you're certainly a very typical of the people that you have working with you and for you. And I can't tell you how much we as a community appreciate all the things that you do to continue the missions at Savannah River Site, and especially, as we've said before, you've mentioned several things where you're involved with the community. You're involved with the educational processes here to help us be more prepared to have more of an impact on our young people, the workforce, as we continue to try to infill as retirements come about, and I know there are going to be a lot of them coming up.
We're hiring about 150 people a year right now just to replace the workforce as those of us with gray hair start to move on. But one more thing I'd like to say, if I get just a second.
Sure.
Talk about you mentioned the people and the involvement in the community. Our workforce is involved in so many things in the community. That a huge supporter of United Way.
Right.
They do the Heart Walk every year. They're involved in Habitat for Humanity. Just a whole spectrum of activities like that. One in particular that touches me is the Toys for Tots campaign.
Yeah.
And they, it's kind of sponsored by our construction organization, and they work with the local Marine Corps here who actually manage it for the area. And so all across the site, before Christmas, people bring toys, and then they get collected in one central area at the end and get loaded onto these 18-wheel trucks. And when you go see that, there's like more than 10,000 toys. There's hundreds and hundreds of bicycles, every toy imaginable. And it's just a sea of toys. But what strikes you then is you think of all that's going to children that live in our area that otherwise wouldn't really have a Christmas. I just find it touching, and I think the generosity of the people there is striking and amazing.
Well, that's a great way to end your comment, and certainly is very true that you're part of the community, you are the community, and we appreciate so much your spending your time with us away from your busy schedule,
great.
Tom.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much again, and pass on to your staff and your employees too how much the community does appreciate, and we do understand, and I think that our viewers will get a better understanding now of what Savannah River Remediation is all about. When you see SRR, now you know what it stands for and what it does on a day-to-day basis. But again, thank you for joining us on Aiken Business Matters. We appreciate you, and if you have any ideas or thoughts, please feel free to communicate with us. I know James is always good about putting up our contact information, and we appreciate James too. He does a great job for getting all this information together so that you can see it in an enjoyable format. But thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you next time on Aiken Business Matters.